Some houses have rules. Not the kind written on paper. Not the kind you learn from a handbook or a welcome letter slipped under a door. The kind you feel in the way the floorboards go quiet when he walks past. In the way the other staff lower their eyes at dinner. In the way no one, not one single person in this enormous, cold, beautiful mansion will say his name out loud after dark. Tonight, a young woman is about to break every single one of those rules. Not because she's reckless, not because she doesn't know the danger, but because some debts, the kind written in blood and silence, don't leave you any other choice. Her name is Clara. She's been working in Ashford Manor for 11 days. 11 days of early mornings, cold corridors, polished silver, and carefully averted eyes. 11 days of learning exactly who runs this place and exactly what happens to people who forget it. Tonight is day 12, and tonight, everything changes. Before we go any further, if you're new here, welcome. This channel tells the stories that make your pulse jump and your mind race. Stories about power, about courage, about the moments when ordinary people are pushed to extraordinary edges. If that's your kind of story, and I think it is, hit that subscribe button right now, because you are absolutely in the right place. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Ashford Manor sits on 40 acres of private land outside the city. Stone walls, iron gates, manicured gardens that look like something out of a painting. The kind of painting that's beautiful from a distance, but deeply unsettling the moment you step inside the frame. The man who owns it is named Dominic Ashford, 41 years old, self-made, though self-made is a word that gets complicated the closer you look at how he built his empire. Real estate, logistics, private contracting, 3 companies, all successful. One offshore account that no journalist has ever managed to crack open. He is not a warm man. He is not a cruel man. Not in the obvious way, not in the way that announces itself. He is something more precise than that. He is a man who understands leverage, who understands that the world runs not on kindness or even on money, but on the simple, quiet, devastating fact that everyone has something to lose. The staff at Ashford Manor number 14, a chef, 2 kitchen assistants, a groundskeeper and his team, 2 drivers, a personal secretary named Mrs. Hartley, who has worked for Dominic for 19 years, and who never, not once, answers a personal question about him, and the house staff, 3 women who clean, prepare rooms, and manage the daily running of the manor's interior. Clara is the newest. She arrived 11 days ago with a single bag, a letter of reference from an agency in the city, and a reason for being here that she told absolutely no one. The other maids, Elena and Fran, liked her well enough. She was quiet, efficient. She didn't ask too many questions, which in Ashford Manor was considered a virtue. But they noticed things. The way she sometimes paused in the upstairs hallway, just outside the study door, as though listening for something. The way her eyes moved when Dominic entered a room, not with the downward deference the others practiced, but with something more complicated. Something that looked almost like calculation. Elena had said to Fran one evening, quietly in the kitchen, "That one's not here by accident." Fran had said nothing. In this house, saying nothing was always the safer choice. What no one in Ashford Manor knew, what Clara had spent weeks making sure no one would find out, was this. Her brother James owed Dominic Ashford £40,000. Not borrowed money, not a loan with paperwork and interest rates, the other kind of debt, the kind that accumulates in back rooms and handshake agreements, the kind where the terms are never written down because the terms aren't really about money at all. James had made a mistake, a serious one. He'd made it 6 months ago, and he'd been paying for it ever since. In sleepless nights, in anonymous phone calls, in the slow, grinding terror of knowing that a man like Dominic Ashford did not simply forget what was owed to him. Clara had watched her brother deteriorate for 5 months before she decided that waiting was no longer an option. If no one else was going to walk into the lion's den, she would. It's 9 o'clock in the evening on day 12 when it happens. Clara is on the ground floor, carrying a dinner tray back toward the kitchen. The hallway is long and dimly lit. Dominic prefers low lighting in the evenings, another of those unwritten rules that everyone simply absorbs without being told. And her footsteps are careful, measured, quiet. She is 3 steps from the kitchen door when she hears it. Not loud. It never needs to be loud. Just his voice. From somewhere above her. From the direction of his private rooms on the upper floor. Traveling down the staircase with the kind of calm authority that doesn't require volume to carry weight. Dominic said to her, "Come to my room." And he added, "I won't ask again." Clara doesn't move. Not for 3 full seconds. The tray trembles slightly in her hands, just slightly. Just enough that the cups rattle once against the saucers before she steadies them. She stares straight ahead at the kitchen door, at the grain of the wood, at nothing. And in the privacy of her own mind, in the half-second before she decides what to do next, one thought surfaces above everything else. She knew this was coming. She'd known since day 3, when she'd been cleaning the upper landing, and he'd passed her without a word, without even a glance, and then stopped at the end of the corridor and stood there for just a moment too long before continuing. She'd known since day 7, when Mrs. Hartley had looked at her across the breakfast table with an expression that wasn't quite pity and wasn't quite warning, but lived somewhere uncomfortably between the two. She'd known. She just hadn't known when. Sound of the tray being set down carefully on the hall table. One slow breath. Clara, whispering to herself, "I'm not afraid of you." A beat. Her knuckles tighten around the edge of the tray. Her knuckles say otherwise. But she sets the tray down. She straightens her back. She smooths the front of her uniform with both palms, a gesture that is equal parts composure and ritual, the physical act of putting herself together before walking into something she cannot take back. And then she walks toward the stairs. She walks. Each step echoes like a countdown. The upper hallway is darker than the ground floor. The wall lamps are turned low, almost off, and the light that does exist comes mostly from the gap beneath his door at the far end of the corridor. Pale, cold, steady, like something waiting. She passes the portraits on the wall without looking at them. 3 generations of Ashfords, all watching. All with that same quality in the eyes. The particular expression of people who have never once in their lives been told no and actually believed it. She reaches the door. It's open, not ajar, fully open, as though he wanted her to have no reason to hesitate, no handle to turn, no moment to reconsider. Just the open doorway and the room beyond it, and him standing at the window with his back to her, one hand resting on the frame, watching the rain streak down the glass. He doesn't turn when she enters. He doesn't acknowledge her at all. The room is large, a desk in dark wood along one wall, clean and almost empty, just a closed laptop and a single lamp, a fireplace that isn't lit tonight, a leather chair angled toward the window where he stands, and the window itself, floor to ceiling, the whole of the estate grounds visible in the lightning flashes, the trees bending in the wind, the iron gates at the far edge just barely visible through the dark and the rain. She stops in the middle of the room. She waits. He makes her wait. 20 seconds. 30. The storm fills the silence. This is deliberate. She understands that. The waiting is part of it. The slow accumulation of discomfort designed to erode composure before a single word has been spoken. It's a technique. She's read about men like this. She's watched what this particular technique did to her brother over 6 months. Watched James come home from meetings with Dominic's people, looking 5 years older each time. She knows what it's designed to do. Knowing doesn't make it easier, but it makes it survivable. He finally turns. Slowly. His gaze is sharp, direct, and entirely without warmth. Dominic said, "You took something that belongs to me." Clara, steady, no hesitation, replied L. "I didn't take anything." He studies her, says nothing for a moment. Dominic continues. Everyone lies before they break. A pause, she meets his eyes. Clara replied, "Then I guess I'm different." The silence that follows is the most dangerous kind, the kind that has weight. And here is where this story stops being about a maid and her employer. Here is where it becomes something else entirely. Because the thing about Dominic Ashford, the thing that his associates understood and his adversaries always discovered too late, was that he had an almost scientific interest in the moment when someone's mask slipped, when the performance of calm gave way to the reality underneath. He'd seen it hundreds of times. He knew exactly how long it took, exactly what kind of pressure to apply, exactly which words worked like a key in a lock. He had never, not once in 19 years of doing this, met someone who held. Clara held. He moves. Not rushed, not loud, just inevitable. The slow, deliberate step of a man who has never once needed to hurry to make his point. Before we go any further, if this tension already has you leaning forward, if you're already calculating every word of that exchange and what it means, you're exactly the kind of person this channel exists for. Hit like right now. It genuinely helps more people find these stories. And subscribe if you haven't already, because this, right here, is only the beginning of what tonight has in store. Dominic said, "You're new. You don't understand how this house works." He's closer now, not threatening, not yet, but present in the way that large, powerful things are present, undeniable. Clara replied, "I understand enough. You think fear makes people obedient." Dominic leans in slightly, just enough. It does. A beat. She doesn't step back. Clara, quiet, but with fire underneath it. No. It makes them desperate. That lands. It lands in a way that very few things land with Dominic Ashford. Not because it's clever, not because it's threatening, but because it's true, and they both know it. And the fact that she said it out loud in this room with the door open and the storm outside, in 14 years of his reputation pressing down on every square inch of the air between them. That is not something he expected. For the first time since she entered the room, something shifts in his eyes. Not softness, not warmth, nothing as readable as that. Just a fractional recalibration. The almost imperceptible adjustment of a man who has just discovered that what he thought was a predictable situation is, in fact, something considerably more interesting. The storm outside howls. Lightning illuminates the grounds. The clock on the mantelpiece ticks. She has his attention now. Not the perfunctory attention he'd given her since day one. The administrative awareness of a new staff member, cataloged and filed. The real kind. The full kind. The kind that Dominic Ashford reserves for things that have surprised him. And in Ashford manner, surprise is the rarest currency of all. She stands in the center of his room, in her uniform, with the storm at the window and the low lamp casting long shadows across the floor, and she does not look away from him. And he looks at her, really looks, for the very first time. Ask yourself this, right now genuinely. Would you have walked into that room, not in a story, not as a thought experiment, if it was real, if it was your brother, your debt, your choice, would you have climbed those stairs? Hold that question, because Clara hasn't even told him the real reason she's here yet. And when she does, everything in this room is going to change. The storm presses harder against the glass. The lamp flickers once. Dominic circles her slowly. Not predatory, but deliberate. The way a person walks around something they're trying to. There is a particular kind of silence that exists between two people when both of them know that the next sentence will change everything. It isn't comfortable. It isn't peaceful. It has texture and temperature. It presses against the skin like the moment before a storm breaks, like the held breath before a verdict is read out loud. This silence is that kind. Dominic stops circling. He stands to her left, slightly behind her, close enough that she can hear him breathe. It's another technique. Positioning, displacement, the subtle physical grammar of dominance. Most people turn when someone stands behind them. The instinct is almost impossible to override. Clara doesn't turn. She stares straight ahead at the rain-streaked window, and she waits. A long beat. Dominic, low, almost conversational. "Your brother owes me money." The room contracts, just slightly, just enough. Her breath catches. Not visibly. She controls it almost completely. but there is a single, fractional hitch in the rhythm of her breathing that she cannot entirely suppress. And a man like Dominic Ashford, who has spent 2 decades reading the involuntary language of people under pressure, catches it immediately. He says nothing about it. He doesn't need to. She turns now, slowly on her own terms, not because he's behind her, but because she's choosing to face him. Clara, very quiet, said, "So this is about him." Dominic replied, "This is about you choosing to hide it." Clara, "I didn't hide. I came here to fix it." A pause. He tilts his head, barely a movement, barely readable. Dominic, low, dangerous, with the faintest edge of something that might be contempt or might be curiosity. "By cleaning my floors?" She doesn't flinch. She doesn't drop her eyes. Clara, "By staying close enough to face you." Absolute stillness. Now he stops. Not the controlled, deliberate stillness he's been performing since she walked in. Something different. Something involuntary. The momentary suspension of a man who has just processed a piece of information that does not fit any of the categories he prepared for this conversation. She is still the woman in the uniform standing in his private room at 9 o'clock at night. None of the external facts have moved, but something underneath the external facts, something in the unspoken agreement about who is permitted to speak and who is required to listen, about who sets the terms and who accepts them. Something in all of that has shifted, quietly, irrevocably, and they both feel it. He straightens up from the desk. He steps toward her again, but the quality of the step is different now. The inevitability is gone. This step is slower, more considered. It has a question in it. Dominic asked her, "You think this is a game?" He reaches out, not violently, not aggressively, and takes hold of her wrist. Firm, a statement more than a threat. The physical equivalent of, "I still have the power to do this." See Clara meeting his eyes without blinking. She replied, "No, I think this is a debt." Dominic asked again, "And how do you plan to pay for it?" She looks down at his hand on her wrist. She looks back up at him, and then, slowly, without drama, without a single wasted movement, she pulls her wrist free, not snatched, not yanked, just withdrawn. The way you withdraw something that was never really his to hold. Clara said, "Not by begging. That hits harder than anything. Harder than the revelation that she came deliberately. Harder than the moment she told him to be careful. Harder even than the quiet fire of 'you be careful,' because those were words, and words are things Dominic knows how to absorb and redirect and weaponize. This was something else. This was the complete, unhurried, with a physical refusal of a dynamic he has operated inside for 19 years. The simple, devastating act of a person taking back their own arm and standing in front of him and offering him nothing. Not tears, not bargaining, not the silent transaction that powerful men always eventually propose in rooms like this one. Nothing. Just her own 2 feet on his floor and her own eyes on his face and the absolute unshakable stillness of someone who has already decided that there is no version of this conversation in which she loses herself. And I need to pause right here, right at this exact moment, because this is the question the whole story has been building toward, and I want you to sit with it properly before we go any further. He grabbed her wrist. She pulled it back. In the context of this room, in this power structure, in the reality of what 40,000 pounds means and what a man like Dominic Ashford is capable of, that single act of pulling her wrist back was either the bravest thing she could have done or the most catastrophically dangerous. And the terrifying truth is that it's both. It's both at exactly the same time. Drop your answer in the comments right now. Courage or suicide? Because the people watching this who say courage and the people who say suicide are both right. And the fact that they're both right is exactly what makes Clara impossible to look away from. He stands there for a moment after she withdraws her wrist, not moving, not speaking. And in the silence, something extraordinary happens. Something that 14 years of working for Dominic Ashford has never once produced in Mrs. Hartley. Something that 19 years of business dealings and negotiations and the particular cold theater of men testing each other's limits has never once produced in any boardroom or backroom or private conversation. Dominic Ashford does not know what to do next. It lasts less than 3 seconds. Then the mask reassembles. Smooth, controlled, unreadable. But those 3 seconds existed. Clara saw them. She will not forget them. He turns away, moves back toward the window. His hands are clasped behind his back. Another controlled gesture. The deliberate management of what to do with one's hands when one's hands have just been made irrelevant. Dominic, quietly to the rain, said, "You think defiance makes you strong. It isn't quite a question, not quite a statement, something between the two." She watches his back. She takes one breath. And then she does something that no one does in this room. She steps forward, not much, half a step, but toward him, closing the distance rather than maintaining it, moving into the space that every unwritten rule of Ashford Manor says belongs to him alone. Clara, soft and completely unwavering. "No, Clara, it just means I have nothing left to lose." The silence crashes louder than the thunder. There it is. There is the sentence that changes everything, that redraws every boundary in the room, and that makes the next 30 seconds the most consequential 30 seconds of the entire night. Because this is the thing about leverage, the thing that Dominic built his entire world on top of, the foundational principle that he has applied to every human interaction for 2 decades. Leverage only works when the other person has something to protect, when they have something to lose. Take that away. Take away the thing they're afraid of losing, and the entire architecture of power collapses. Not dramatically, not with noise or violence, just quietly, structurally, completely. The way a building collapses when you remove the single load-bearing wall that everything else was resting on. Clara has just removed the wall. She has told him, directly without apology, without the performance of vulnerability that would make it manipulative, that she came here with nothing, that James's deterioration over 6 months has already cost her the thing she was most afraid to lose, which is her brother intact and safe and himself, that she arrived at Ashford Manor already past the point where threats could reach her. You cannot leverage a person who is already at zero. He turns, slowly, and now he looks at her. Really, fully, completely looks at her. Not as a servant, not as a problem to be managed, as something unpredictable, as someone he does not have a category for. The storm rages. He studies her face. She lets him. 19 years. Hundreds of people in rooms like this one. Negotiations, confrontations, the careful dismantling of resistance in people who came in thinking they had a position and left understanding they never did. In 19 years, Dominic Ashford has never once looked at someone standing in front of him and found himself genuinely uncertain about what they would do next. He is uncertain now. And this is the part that will matter, the part that echoes forward into everything that follows. He does not hate it. A long, charged moment. The lightning, the rain, the clock. Then he moves, not toward her, away. He walks past her, close enough that she feels the movement of air, toward the door. He stops just inside the frame. His back is to her again. His hand rests on the door frame, but he doesn't hold it, doesn't grip it, just rests there, like punctuation. This is where the story does something unexpected. This is where it refuses to be the story you thought it was going to be. The story where power crushes, or the story where defiance is punished, or even the story where the brave young woman wins in a clean and satisfying way that lets everyone watching exhale comfortably. This story doesn't give you the comfortable exhale. It gives you something stranger and realer and considerably more difficult to process. He speaks. His voice is different, not softer exactly, but something about the precision of it has changed, as though he has stopped performing the sentence before he says it. Dominic, without turning, "Your brother's debt," the longest beat of the night. Dominic is cleared. Absolute silence. Clara doesn't move, doesn't speak, doesn't breathe, not for 2 full seconds. Clara, barely above a whisper. "Why?" He doesn't answer immediately. His hand drops from the doorframe. He stands very still. Then, Dominic, because I don't like losing interesting people. He walks out. The door stays open. His footsteps recede down the corridor, unhurried even, disappearing into the dark of the upper hallway until the only sounds left are the storm and the clock and Clara's own breathing. She stands there, alone in the center of his room, the lamp still burning, the window still streaming with rain, the door still open, and somehow that open door is the strangest detail of all, the one that refuses to resolve into anything simple or comfortable or finished. He could have closed it. He left it open. She doesn't move for a long time. She stands in the middle of the room and she breathes and she processes, runs back through everything that just happened the way you run back through a conversation that mattered, checking each moment, interrogating each exchange, trying to understand what was real and what was performance and where exactly the line was between the two. The debt is cleared. James is free. She did it. But, she is still standing in Dominic Ashford's room. She is still wearing his uniform. She is still inside the walls of Ashford Manor with the iron gates and the 40 acres and the 14 staff members and 19 years of architecture, physical and otherwise, designed to make sure that everyone inside it understands exactly where they stand. And something happened in this room tonight that she doesn't have a name for yet. Something that is not victory and not defeat and not rescue and not danger. Or rather something that is all of those things simultaneously, layered over each other like the weather outside. Impossible to separate into clean, manageable components. He said he didn't want to lose interesting people. Not, I'm releasing your brother out of mercy. Not, I'm clearing the debt because you were brave. Not even, I respect what you did. Interesting people. As though this was an audition she didn't know she was giving. As though the last 12 days and the last 40 minutes in this room were not a crisis she was surviving, but a test she was being evaluated against. And the question, the one that will keep her awake tonight in the servants' quarters while the storm finishes its business over the manor and the house settles into its nighttime silences. The question she cannot answer, cannot even fully form yet, sits in her chest like a coal. Did he let her go? Or did he just claim her in a different way? She exhales. She looks at the open door. She looks at the rain, and very quietly, to herself, to the room, to no one and everyone, Clara. This isn't over. She walks out. The door stays open behind her. The lamp burns. The storm continues, variable in a calculation. Clara's up before 5. She always is. Old habit, the discipline of years of making herself useful before anyone thought to question whether she belonged. She dresses. She ties her hair. She looks at herself in the small mirror above the basin in her room. Really looks the way you do after a night that changed something, checking to see if the change is visible on the surface yet. It isn't. She looks the same. Same face, same eyes, same person. Somehow this surprises her. She goes to the kitchen. Mrs. Hartley is already there. She is always already there, has apparently always already been there, exists in some permanent state of prior arrival that no one has ever managed to get ahead of. She is standing at the large central counter with a cup of tea and a leather-bound schedule book. Wah, and she looks up when Clara enters with an expression of such complete neutrality that it communicates, paradoxically, a very great deal. She knows. Of course she knows. Mrs. Hartley has worked in this house for 19 years. She knows everything that happens inside these walls. Not because she asks, not because she eavesdrops, but because 19 years of paying close attention in a small, sealed world means that the shape of events announces itself before the details do. She would have heard the summons. She would have heard the footsteps on the stairs. She would have heard or felt or simply understood the way the house changed around 9 o'clock last night and then changed again around 9:45. She says nothing about any of it. She says, Mrs. Hartley, without looking up from the schedule book. There are fresh rolls. Chef came in early. Clara pours herself tea. She sits. She eats a roll. The kitchen is warm. The aga has been going since before anyone was awake. And the warmth is almost aggressive after the cold of the night, pressing in from all sides, insisting on comfort. Eleanor arrives at 5:30. She looks at Clara once, a single, quick, comprehensive look, the kind that women who pay attention deploy without appearing to. And then she goes to the counter and pours tea and says nothing. Fran arrives at 10 to 6. She looks at Clara and looks at Mrs. Hartley and looks at the ceiling in the specific way of a person who has decided that whatever is happening in this room is not her business. And she is actively, deliberately choosing not to make it her business. The four of them exist in the kitchen in the particular silence of people who share a world, and are each, for their own reasons, choosing not to name it out loud. She doesn't see him until 11. She's in the upstairs library, running a cloth along the shelves of a room that is used constantly, but somehow never looks used. The books always precisely aligned, the reading chair always precisely positioned, the whole room operating at a level of order that suggests either an obsessive personality or a very thorough cleaning. She is still in the uniform, still in the house, still running a cloth along shelves in the library while his footsteps pause outside the door and then continue and leave her standing in the middle of a room that suddenly feels like a different kind of space than it did yesterday. Why is she still here? She doesn't answer this question. Not directly, not yet. She finishes the library and moves to the next room on her list, and then the next, working through the morning with the same careful efficiency she has brought to every morning for 11 days. And she does not let herself think about the footsteps outside the door. She thinks about them anyway. Lunch in the staff dining room. Elena is talking about her weekend, plans involving her sister in a market and a film that's been out for 3 weeks that she keeps meaning to see. Fran is eating and listening with the comfortable half-attention of old friendship. Mrs. Hartley is not present. She eats separately always, a boundary that everyone understands without it ever having been stated. Clara eats. She participates in the conversation at the level required to be present without being conspicuous. Then Elena says, quite casually, buttering a piece of bread. Elena said, "He asked about your reference this morning." Clara keeps her face still. Clara, even. Did he? Elena. Mrs. Hartley mentioned it. Said he wanted to see the original paperwork. From the agency. A beat. Fran is suddenly very interested in her soup. Clara. That's thorough of him. Elena. Looking at her now directly with the particular, steady gaze of a woman who has watched a lot and learned to trust her own observations. The agency is real. I looked it up once when I first started. They're legitimate, Clara. I know, Elena. But they don't usually send people with your kind of references. The language in them, it's very specific. Silence. The dining room is warm. Someone's left the door to the kitchen slightly open and the smell of coffee drifts through. Clara, quietly. Elena, I'm not asking. I want you to know I'm not asking. A pause. Elena. I just think you should know that he's looking. Whatever you did last night, whatever happened up there, it didn't close anything. It opened something. She goes back to her bread. The conversation shifts back to the film, to the market, to the weekend. Clara finishes her lunch. She thinks, I know, this is the moment, this quiet, ordinary bread and soup moment in the staff dining room, where the story reveals its true shape. Not the confrontation in the bedroom, not the wrist pulled free, not the debt cleared. This moment. Because Elena, who has worked in this house long enough to understand its weather patterns, is telling her something that Clara already suspects but has not yet allowed herself to fully accept. She came here to end something. She may have started something instead. The afternoon passes. She works. She moves through the rooms of Ashford Manor with her cart and her cloths and her polishes and her practiced invisibility, and the house exists around her the way it always has. Enormous, beautiful, sealed and alive with the particular energy of a place that has been shaped entirely by one person's will. She passes his study at 3 o'clock. The door is open. He's inside. She can see him from the corridor. Sitting at the desk, laptop open, phone to his ear, the posture of a man completely absorbed in something that has nothing to do with her. She walks past. She hears him say into the phone very clearly, Dominic, push it. Whatever they need, give it to them. I want this resolved by Friday. Then she's past the door and his voice fades, and she's in the next section of corridor, and the afternoon light is coming through the window at the end, in long pale bars across the floorboards. She stops. She stands in the light for a moment, and she thinks about James, about calling him, about what she will say, about the sound his voice will make when she tells him it's done. She has been putting this off. She has told herself it's because she wants to be sure, wants to wait until she has confirmation beyond words spoken in a private room during a storm. But the truth she admits to herself now, standing in the afternoon light with the bars of pale sun across the floor, is something more complicated than caution. If she calls James and tells him it's over, if she allows that conversation to happen, allows him to cry with relief and ask how, and she says, I can't explain right now, and he says, come home, Clara. Come home right now. Then she will have to answer a question. Why isn't she already home? Why is she still standing in the corridor of Ashford Manor in the uniform in the afternoon light, thinking about footsteps outside a library door? She doesn't call James, not today. She tells herself, tomorrow. Tomorrow when things are clearer. Tomorrow when she knows what she's going to say. She goes back to work, and the house goes on around her, silent, watching, waiting, the way house is built by people like Dominic Ashford always do. Patient, in no hurry at all, because they know these houses, the way their builders know, the people inside them always reveal themselves eventually. Given enough time, given enough corridors and closed doors and afternoon light, and the slow, accumulating weight of days that started as temporary and became, without announcement, something else. She puts her card away at 5. She goes to the kitchen. She has tea. At 5:30, a note arrives. Not delivered by Mrs. Hartley, not slipped under a door. Left on the kitchen table, just placed there, on top of the stack of staff schedules, a single folded piece of paper with her name on the outside in handwriting that is spare and angular and contains not one unnecessary stroke. She opens it, she reads it again. Elena pretends not to watch. Fran has suddenly become very focused on the window. The note contains 7 words. 7 words in that spare, angular handwriting on a piece of paper that smells faintly of the study, of old books and wood polish, and the particular atmosphere of a room where a great deal of thinking gets done. 7 words that don't explain anything, don't apologize for anything, don't promise anything or request anything or resolve any of the questions that have been accumulating since 9 o'clock last night. 7 words that simply, precisely, unmistakably open a door. She folds the note. She puts it in the pocket of her uniform. She finishes her tea. She goes to her room, and sitting on the edge of the narrow bed in the east wing, with the evening coming in through the window and the storm-cleaned garden slowly going dark outside, she unfolds the note one more time and reads it one more time in the fading light. 7 words. Dominic, the note read in his voice, said, dinner, tomorrow, 8 o'clock, not his staff. She stares at it. Outside, the first star appears in the cleared sky. Just one, just barely, at the edge of the horizon where the clouds have finally pulled back far enough to let the night through. Clara, to herself, to the note, to the room, to the question that has no clean answer. What are you doing? She doesn't know if she's asking him or herself. The star holds. The sky darkens. The house breathes around her, slow, vast, patient. And in his study on the upper floor, 4 walls and 2 staircases away, the lamp burns late into the evening while Dominic Ashford sits at his desk and does not, for once, look at the laptop. He looks at the window, at the cleared sky, at the first star. Ask yourself this. Right now, genuinely, sitting wherever you are watching this, what does a man like Dominic Ashford want with a woman who has nothing left to lose? Not romantically, not simply. What does a man who has built his entire world on leverage and calculation and the careful management of what other people stand to lose, what does that man want with someone who walked into his house, stripped away every tool he had, and left him standing in the middle of his own room without a script? Does he want to understand her? Does he want to have her close because the unpredictable thing is always better managed from the inside? Or is it something simpler and stranger and more human than either of those? The oldest, most inconvenient truth about people who spend their whole lives surrounded by the predictable. Sometimes the one thing they cannot resist is the thing they cannot predict. And in her room on the ground floor of the East Wing, Clara sits on the edge of her bed with a folded piece of paper in her hands and 7 words in her mind, and the whole enormous weight of tomorrow sitting on her chest. She made herself a promise once, standing in her kitchen at 2 in the morning while James's voice cracked over the phone, that she would never again let someone else's power determine the shape of her life. She is still keeping that promise. She is almost certain of it. Clara, quietly to herself, to the star, to the promise. Not as staff. She folds the note. She puts it on the nightstand. She turns off the light. Tomorrow. She spends the morning of the next day the same way she has spent every morning for 12 days. Efficiently, quietly, without drawing attention to the fact that anything has changed. But everything has changed. She feels it in the way the house feels different around her. Not physically, not in any measurable sense, but in the way that spaces feel different when your relationship to them shifts. Ashford Manor is the same stone and glass and dark wood and high ceilings it has always been. The corridors are the same length. The rooms are the same temperature. The portraits on the upper landing still watch with that particular Ashford quality of seeing without acknowledging. But she is not the same person who walked up those stairs 2 nights ago. And the house somehow knows it. This is the thing about spaces that are built around a single person's will. They are extraordinarily sensitive to shifts in the human weather inside them. Ashford Manor was built, in every practical and psychological sense, to reflect and amplify Dominic. His preferences in the lighting, his tolerance for silence, his particular brand of controlled, beautiful austerity that communicates power without ever needing to announce it. When something enters that space and does not behave according to its logic, when someone arrives who cannot be categorized, cannot be leveraged, cannot be made to perform the expected responses to the expected pressures, the whole space registers it. Like a frequency the house wasn't tuned for. Clara is that frequency now. She has been since 9 o'clock 2 nights ago. She finishes the East Corridor. She moves to the morning room. She works with her usual precision. Cloth, surface, order restored, move on. The domestic rhythm of it is almost meditative. Almost. At 10:30, Mrs. Hartley appears in the doorway of the morning room. She stands there for a moment, framed, composed, the 19-year keeper of this house's internal logic. And she looks at Clara with an expression that is doing considerable work behind its neutral surface. Mrs. Hartley said to Clara, "Mr. Ashford has asked that you be relieved of your afternoon duties today." Clara keeps working. 1 beat, 2. Clara asked, "Did he say why?" Mrs. Hartley answered, "He did not." A pause. Clara straightens. She looks at Mrs. Hartley properly, woman to woman, outside the hierarchy for just a moment. Clara asked Mrs. Hartley, "How long have you worked for him?" Mrs. Hartley, without hesitation, replied, 19 years, Clara asked. In 19 years. Has he ever done this before? The longest pause of the conversation. Mrs. Hartley looks at her with eyes that have seen everything this house has produced across 2 decades and have learned to metabolize all of it without visible reaction. Mrs. Hartley, finally, very precisely, "He has not." She turns and walks away down the corridor. Clara watches her go. "He has not." 3 words, delivered without emphasis, without editorial, without any of the layering that a different person might have added. The warning or the approval or the complicated something in between. Just the fact. Clean and plain and sitting in the morning room like a stone dropped into still water, sending rings outward in every direction. In 19 years. He has not. She puts her cloth down. She looks at the room around her. The morning light coming through the tall windows, the pale upholstery, the flowers on the side table that someone has arranged with the same obsessive precision that governs every surface in this house. She thinks, "What are you doing, Dominic Ashford?" She thinks, "What am I doing?" She goes to her room. She sits on the edge of the bed. She picks up her phone. and she looks at James's name in her contacts, and she puts the phone face down on the mattress beside her, and she stares at the window. The cleared sky from last night has held. It's a bright day, the kind of sharp, scrubbed brightness that follows serious weather, where everything looks slightly more itself than usual, the colors more saturated, the edges more defined. The garden outside her window is still wet but recovering, the grass already beginning to reassemble its dignity after the storm. She picks the phone back up. She calls James. It rings 3 times. Then his voice. And she was right. She was completely right about the sound of it. The way relief moves through a voice before a single specific word has been spoken. The way a person sounds when a weight they'd stopped believing would ever lift suddenly, impossibly does. James, voice cracking slightly at the edges. He said, "Clara, Clara," steady, warm, careful, replied, "It's done, James." Silence on the line. A long one. James said, "What do you mean it's done?" Clara replied, "I mean the debt is cleared. It's finished. You don't owe him anything." Another silence. Longer. She can hear him breathing. James asked, "How?" "Clara, how did you—" "I told you not to go near him. I told you he was—" Clara cut in. "I know what you told me." James said, "You went to him anyway." Clara added, "Yes." A beat. James, and now there is something in his voice that is not only relief, something more complicated, something that is also fear. The retrospective kind that arrives after the danger has passed and is almost worse because now there is space to feel it fully. What did he do? Clara, what did he— Clara cut in again. He listened. Silence. Clara said, "He's not what you think he is. He's not simple in the way you think he is." James added, "He's dangerous. Whatever happened in there, whatever he said, he's still dangerous." Clara quietly replied, "I know." James said, "Then come home. Please. Just come home." The longest pause of the call. Outside her window, a bird lands on the wet garden wall and sits there, very still, looking at something she can't see. Clara replied, "Soon." James asked, "What does soon mean?" Clara replied, "It means soon, James. He doesn't push further. He knows her well enough, has known her all his life. Through all the configurations of knowing that a brother and sister accumulate across decades of being each other's most reliable constant, to know when pushing will not produce a different answer." James, finally quietly, asked Clara, "Are you safe?" She looks at the bird on the wall. It hasn't moved. Clara replied, "Yes." She's almost certain it's true. The afternoon is hers. She reads for a while. She walks the perimeter of the garden. Outside for the first time since her arrival, the wet grass under her feet, the sharp, bright air, the enormous old trees at the boundary of the estate dripping steadily in the aftermath of the storm. She stands at the iron fence at the far end of the east garden and looks through it at the road beyond. The ordinary road, the world outside the gates, the life that exists at a normal scale with normal proportions. And she stands there for a while, not quite inside and not quite outside. This is the image I want you to hold. Clara at the iron fence in the afternoon light, one hand resting on the cold metal, looking out at the ordinary road. Not because it's symbolic in a neat, tidy literary way, though it is that, unavoidably, but because it's true. It's the truest image the story has produced so far. A woman standing at a boundary, not trying to cross it, not walking away from it, just standing at it, feeling its reality under her hand, looking at both sides simultaneously. She came here to free her brother. Her brother is free. The gate is right there. She is still standing at the fence. She goes back inside at 4. She showers. She dresses, not in the uniform. The note said, not as staff. She has limited options in her bag, but she finds something. Dark, simple, good enough. She looks at herself in the small mirror. Same face, same eyes. No, not quite. Something different now. Not in the features, in the quality of the attention behind them. Something has moved forward. Something that was being held carefully in reserve for 11 days, kept back and managed and deliberately not deployed, is now sitting fully in her eyes, visible, making no apology for being visible. She looks like herself. With the most herself she's looked since she arrived. 8 o'clock. She's shown by a member of staff she hasn't seen before, which interests her, the deliberate substitution of unfamiliar personnel for an occasion that requires no familiar context, to a dining room she has cleaned many times but never occupied. It is smaller than the formal dining room, more private. A round table, which matters, she notes, because a round table has no head, set for two, with candles and wine, and the particular careful beauty of a room that has been prepared with genuine attention, rather than mere competence. He's already there. Standing by the window again, of course by the window, she thinks. The window is where he goes when he's thinking. She knows this now, but he turns when she enters, immediately, not making her wait this time. He is dressed differently than she has ever seen him. Still precise. Everything he does is precise. But the particular armor of the business day is gone. Dark shirt, no tie, sleeves rolled once. He looks, for the first time since she arrived in this house, like a person rather than a position. They look at each other across the room. This is the moment, before a word is spoken, before anything is explained or negotiated or navigated, where the story asks its real question. Not the dramatic one, not what will he do or what will she do, or even who holds the power now. The real question is quieter and considerably more difficult. What do two people do when the structure that defined their relationship, the debt, the leverage, the uniform, the hierarchy of employer and staff, and all the invisible architecture that made every interaction legible? What do they do when all of that has been removed, when the stage has been cleared, when there is nothing left between them but the fact of each other? He gestures toward the table. Dominic told her, "Sit, please, please." She notes it, files it. She sits. He sits. A member of staff, the unfamiliar one, pours wine and disappears. The door closes. Silence. But a different kind from any silence this house has produced between them so far. Less weaponized. The less architectural. Just two people at a table with candles and wine and the accumulated weight of 2 nights and everything that happened in them. Dominic said, "You're wondering why you're here." Clara replied, "I know why I'm here. I'm wondering what you want from it." He looks at her. Something that might, in better light, be the beginning of a smile. Dominic added, "Direct." Clara replied, "I've found it saves time." Dominic said, "It does." He turns his wine glass once. A small, contained movement. Dominic said, "I want to understand something." Clara asked, "What?" Dominic answered, "Why you came here. Not the reason you gave me. I understand the reason you gave me. I mean the decision underneath that reason. The moment when you decided that this was the thing to do." She looks at him, and he is watching her with the full version of his attention, the kind she has only seen deployed twice before, both times in his room during the storm, and it has the quality of something that expects truth, that will recognize anything short of truth immediately and without drama. She decides to give it the truth. Clara replied, "My brother was disappearing, not dramatically, not all at once, just gradually. The way people disappear when something is consuming them from the inside. He stopped calling as often. When I saw him, he was thinner. He'd stopped making plans for things more than a week away, because I think he genuinely stopped believing there was a more than a week away worth planning for." She picks up her glass. She doesn't drink from it immediately. She holds it. Clara continued, "I watched that happen for 5 months. I tried the practical things first. Lawyers, people who might be able to negotiate, people who had connections. Nothing. You don't leave gaps for that kind of approach. I understood that eventually." She looks at him directly. She adds, "So I thought, if there's no gap to work through, I need to be inside." Dominic asked, "You applied to the agency?" Clara answered, 3 months before I came here. I worked 2 other positions first, building the references, making the paperwork real so that if you checked, and I knew you'd check, it would hold." A long pause. Dominic quietly asked, 3 months? Clara continued, "James didn't know. He still doesn't know the details, and I'd like to keep it that way." Dominic nods. Once, he picks up his own glass. Dominic asked her, "What did you think would happen when you got here?" What was the plan? Clara answered, I told you. I didn't have one beyond getting close enough to face you directly. Plans built around people like you don't survive contact. He is quiet for a moment. Dominic said, people like me. Clara replied, people who understand leverage, who've built systems specifically designed to make sure there's no angle, no approach, no external pressure that can reach them. You can't plan against that from the outside. You have to be on the inside before you can see where the gaps actually are. He looks at her for a long time. Dominic asked again, and were there gaps? Clara replied, one. He asked, which one? Which one? She meets his eyes. Clara replied, you. This is where I need you to understand something about what Clara is doing and is not doing at this moment. She is not flattering him. She is not performing vulnerability or deploying charm or executing some calculated strategy designed to soften him further. She has moved past all of that. She moved past all of that in his room 2 nights ago when she pulled her wrist back and told him she had nothing left to lose. What she is doing is telling the truth. The gap in Dominic Ashford's system, the one thing his elaborate, airtight architecture of leverage and calculation could not account for, was Dominic Ashford himself. The fact that underneath 19 years of constructed power, there is a person who is, like all people, susceptible to the thing he has spent his entire adult life making sure no one around him could be susceptible to. The unexpected, the uncontrollable, the thing that walks into your house and refuses to behave according to any of your categories. He is very still. Dominic said, that's a dangerous thing to say to me. Clara replied, I know. But you asked for the truth, and I've decided I'm not going to manage what I say to you anymore. I did that for 11 days, and it was exhausting and unnecessary, and I'm not going to do it in this room. Another long pause. Outside the dining room windows, the estate is dark and the sky is clear. The stars that began to emerge last night are fully out now, the whole spread of them, sharp and cold and vast above the Ashford grounds. Dominic asked, why did you stay? After I cleared the debt. You could have left that night. She looks at him. Clara asked him, why did you leave the door open? The question lands. He absorbs it. He says nothing for long enough that the silence becomes its own answer, or rather becomes the space where the answer lives, where it is fully formed and mutually understood, but does not require words because words would make it smaller than it is. Here's the answer. Not the one either of them says out loud. The real one. The one that lives in the silence between the question and the moment they both decide to reach for their wine glasses at the same time, and then both stop and both notice that they stopped in both for the first time since the story began, find themselves on the edge of something that is not tension and not danger, and not the charged electricity of a confrontation, but something considerably more disorienting, something that feels like the beginning of being known. He left the door open because closing it would have been a declaration, would have said, this is finished, categorized, resolved. And Dominic Ashford, for all his control, for all his precision, for all the 19 years of careful architecture, could not make himself close the door on someone he hadn't finished understanding. She stayed because leaving would have been a retreat. And Clara, for all her practicality, for all the 3 months of careful planning and the 11 days of careful performance, could not make herself walk away from a room she hadn't finished reading. They are, these two people, more alike than either of them has fully admitted yet, both builders of careful systems. Both people who learned early that the world requires you to be more managed, more controlled, more strategically present than the people around you if you want to protect the things that matter. Both people who have gotten very, very good at that management. And both people sitting in a candlelit dining room with a round table and no head on the other side of a storm, finding out what happens when two people who are expert at controlling every interaction around them encounter someone equally expert at doing the same thing. It turns out what happens is this. You stop performing. You just stop because there is no performance sufficient, because the other person will see through it immediately, and the seeing through is somehow worse than the vulnerability underneath it, more exposing, more honest. And after a certain point, you either leave the room or you put the performance down and sit in the uncomfortable nakedness of being actually, genuinely, without defense, present. Neither of them leaves the room. The candles burn. The stars are out. They talk. Not about the debt, not about James, not about the mechanics of how she got here or the strategy of what he knew or didn't know or when he figured it out. They talk about other thing, the kind of other things that two people talk about when they are actually genuinely trying to understand who the other person is rather than what they can do for them or to them. He asks about her childhood. She tells him, not all of it, not yet, but the shape of it. The two of them and their mother and the particular resourcefulness of people who learn to make things work without the materials other people take for granted. She asks about his companies. He tells her, not the public version, not the press release version, but what actually interests him about the work. What problems he's actually trying to solve. The gap between what the world thinks he does and what he understands himself to be doing. It is, against all probability, a real conversation. And somewhere in the middle of it, somewhere between the second glass of wine and the point at which the candles have burned down by a third, something shifts between them that is neither the power, dynamic of the first night, nor the careful navigation of the morning after. Something that has no name yet, something new. Around 10:30, there is a pause in the conversation, a natural one, the kind that occurs when two people have covered real ground and need a moment to absorb it before going further. In the pause, he looks at her, and she lets herself be looked at, which is itself a new thing, a thing she has not done once in 12 days inside this house. Dominic said, "I need to tell you something." She waits. Dominic, "I knew about your brother, about why you were really here." Not immediately. Day 5. Mrs. Hartley runs background checks on all new staff as standard. Your cover held, but there was a thread, just one, that I pulled and it unraveled enough for me to see the connection to James. Clara is very still. Clara carefully asked, "You knew for 6 days?" Dominic, "Yes," Clara asked again. "And you waited?" Dominic replied, "Yes." Clara asked, "Why?" He looks at the candle for a moment, then back at her. Dominic said, "Because I wanted to see what you would do. I expected you to come to me directly once you felt established enough. Make your case, offer something, try to negotiate from inside the house rather than outside it. It was a sound strategy." Clara said, "But?" Dominic added, "But you didn't. You just kept working." Day 6, 7, 8. You just kept doing your job perfectly without any visible sign that you were anything other than what your paperwork said you were. And I found that I was curious about what you were waiting for, about what you were building toward. He pauses. Then he continued, "And then day 9, you stopped outside my study door and stood there for 11 seconds and then walked on. And I understood that you weren't building toward anything, that you were simply being ready, waiting until the conditions were right rather than forcing conditions to your preferred timeline." He looks at her and continued, "That's not a common quality." Silence. Clara, processing, very quiet, asked, "So when you summoned me?" Dominic replied, "I wanted to see who you actually were. The paperwork version I had, the 11 days of observation I had, but not the real one, not the one who existed underneath the performance." Clara asked, "And?" He holds her gaze. Dominic replied, "And you pulled your wrists back," the simplest sentence of the night, the one that carries the most weight. This is the revelation underneath the revelation. This is the layer below the layer. He knew. He knew for 6 days, and he said nothing, and he watched and he waited, and then he summoned her, not to catch her, not to punish her, not even to negotiate, to see her, to find out whether the person who had been patient enough and disciplined enough and strategically sophisticated enough To spend 11 days as a maid in his house without breaking cover was the same person in real life as she was on the surface. And she was. She was exactly, completely, entirely herself. She pulled her wrist back. She told him to be careful. She stepped forward. She told him she had nothing left to lose, and he knew, having read her file, having watched her for 11 days, having understood the architecture of what she'd built to get into this house, that this was not performance, that it was the truest thing spoken in that room during the entire storm. A woman who spent 3 months constructing an approach to protect her brother and then executed it flawlessly for 11 days, and then stood in a private room at 9 o'clock at night and told the most powerful person in her current world that she had nothing left to lose, is a woman who has already given everything that matters, who is operating from a place beyond fear, who is, in the specific and technical and deeply human sense that Dominic Ashford understands better than almost anyone, free. Clara sits at the round table in the candlelight, and she processes this, all of it, the 6 days of him knowing, the watching, the summoning, the real reason for the open door. And she processes it with the same quality of stillness she has brought to everything else in this story. Not performed, not managed, real. Clara finally said, "You could have just talked to me." Day 5, when you found the thread. You could have called me in and said, "I know who you are and why you're here. Let's discuss it." Dominic replied, "I could have." Clara, "Why didn't you?" He is quiet for a moment. Dominic replied, "Because I already knew what you would have said. You would have made your case, clearly, logically, without begging. You would have offered me whatever you had to offer, and I would have made my decision based on the merits of the case." A pause. He continued, "I didn't want to make a decision based on the merits of the case." She looks at him. Clara asked, "You wanted to know who I was first?" Dominic replied, "I wanted to know if you were real. The candles, the stars, the round table with no head, a very long silence that is not uncomfortable. And here is where I want to stop. Right here, right at this moment, right at the sentence, I wanted to know if you were real, and say something directly to you watching this. This is the question underneath all the other questions. The one the story has been asking since the cold open, since Clara froze on the ground floor with the tray trembling in her hands and whispered that she wasn't afraid. The one it asked when Dominic turned from the window and the lightning illuminated his face. The one it asked in the library, in the corridor, in the note, at the iron fence in the afternoon light. Are you real? Not, are you who you say you are? Not, can I trust you? Not even, do you have something I want? Are you real? Is the person in front of me actually fully, completely present? Not performing presence, not constructing presence, but genuinely, vulnerably, irreducibly there? Because the terrible and beautiful truth about people who build systems of control around themselves, who learn to manage every interaction, who become so expert at the architecture of power that they can walk into any room and recalibrate it to their advantage within minutes. The truth about those people is this: they are extraordinarily lonely, not in the way they would ever say out loud, not in the way they might even consciously acknowledge, but in the way that anyone is lonely when they have spent so long being the person who controls the interaction that they have forgotten what it feels like to simply be in one. Dominic Ashford built a world in which everything could be managed and nothing could surprise him. And then Clara walked into it with nothing to lose, and she was real. He reaches across the table, not to take her hand. He places his own hand on the table, open, between them. A gesture that has no precedent in anything this story has shown you about him. A gesture that belongs not to the man who owns the manor and the 40 acres and the 3 companies and the offshore account, but to the person underneath all of that. The one who wanted to know if she was real. She looks at his hand on the table. She looks at him, and she places her hand next to his. Not in it, next to it. Their fingers are almost touching. The almost is its own kind of answer. Complete, honest, not rushing toward anything, not pulling away from anything, just a present, just real. Dominic very quietly asked, "What happens now?" She looks at him for a long time. Clara replied, "I don't know." Clara added, "That's the first honest answer either of us has given to that question." He almost smiles, not quite, but almost. Dominic asked her, "Will you stay?" She looks at the candle, at his hand next to hers on the table, at the stars through the window, at all the things she came here with, the mission, the plan, the 3 months of careful construction, the 11 days of performance, the 40 minutes in a storm, the note with 7 words, the afternoon at the iron fence, James, freed, at herself, standing. Clara asked, "Not as staff?" And Dominic nods. One nod. Quiet. Containing something that in the vocabulary of Dominic Ashford is the equivalent of volumes. She stays. Not forever. Or not yet. Not with that word attached to it. Not with any of the words that would make it into something it isn't ready to be yet. But she stays through the rest of that evening and through the breakfast the next morning that is the first breakfast she has eaten in the main dining room rather than the staff kitchen. And through the days that follow, which are different from every day that preceded them in every way that matters. She is not staff. She is not a guest. She is not a prisoner, not a trophy, not a project, not a problem being managed. She is Clara in Ashford Manor after the storm. And the house, which was built around one person's will and which has spent 19 years amplifying that will back at everyone who came inside it, the house adjusts, slowly, with small sounds, the way old houses do, as though making room for something new. James calls on the 3rd day. His voice is lighter than she has heard it in 7 months. He asks how she is. She says, "Good," genuinely. He asks when she's coming home. She says, "I'm not sure yet." There's a pause on the line. James said, "Clara, are you happy?" She looks out the window, not the servants' quarters window, not the narrow east wing view of the garden wall, the window of the room she's been given, upstairs with the long view of the estate, the iron gates at the far edge, the road beyond. Clara replied, "I'm something. I'll let you know what it is when I've figured it out." James laughs. She had almost forgotten the sound of him laughing. She stays on the call for another 20 minutes. When she hangs up, she stands at the window for a while, looking at the gates. From up here, they look different than they did from the garden. Less like a boundary, more like a feature of the landscape, part of the whole picture rather than the edge of it. She hears his footsteps in the corridor outside. She recognizes them. Of course she recognizes them. They slow, stop. Outside her door, she waits. He knocks. First time he has ever knocked. Clara said, "Come in." The door opens. He stands in the frame. That same quality of presence that fills a doorway without demanding to, that simply exists at full volume without amplification. He looks at her at the window. She looks at him in the door. Dominic said, "There's something I want to show you. In the East Garden, if you have time." She almost laughs. She doesn't. Claire replied, "You're asking if I have time." Dominic said, "Yes." Clara replied, "Give me 5 minutes." He nods. He pulls the door closed, gently, all the way closed, and his footsteps recede down the corridor. She turns back to the window, the gates, the road, the world outside. She turns away from the window. She gets her coat, and here, right here, is where I have to ask you the question I promised you at the beginning. The one the story has been saving. Did he let her go, or did he claim her in a different way? The answer, the honest one, the complicated one, the one that refuses to resolve into either the romantic version or the cynical version, is this: both, and neither. He cleared the debt and left the door open and sent the note and told the truth and knocked on her door for the first time. And every single one of those things was a choice, a deliberate, considered choice made by a man who does not make accidental choices. In that sense, yes, he claimed her. Not as property, not as leverage, not as a managed asset, but in the way any person claims something they've decided matters to them. He decided she mattered. He acted accordingly, and she stayed. She stood at the iron fence and looked at the road and came back inside and ate breakfast in the main dining room and gave James her honest answer and stood at the upstairs window, and when he knocked, she said, "Give me 5 minutes." She could have said, "I'm leaving." She has always been able to say, "I'm leaving." She is not someone who stays anywhere she doesn't choose to stay. She chose. She buttons her coat. She goes to find him in the East Garden. The gate is still there. She doesn't go near it. Not today. This isn't over. She said it herself 3 nights ago, standing alone in his room in the lamplight, with the storm outside and the open door and the first clear star just beginning to emerge at the edge of the clouds. She was right. It isn't over. It isn't even close to over. What it is, what it has become, in the space of one storm and 2 conversations and a note with 7 words and a round table with no head and a hand placed next to a hand in the candlelight, is a beginning, the most dangerous kind, the kind you don't plan for, the kind that arrives in the middle of something else entirely and rearranges everything and then stands there, completely unapologetic, waiting to see what you'll do next. The East Garden, morning light, the storm-cleaned air. 2 people standing among the old trees, close enough to talk, far enough apart that nothing has to be named yet. The house behind them, watching. The gate at the far end, open for the first time. Not locked, not closed, just open. Both of them know it, neither of them walk toward it. Final so. Here we are. The debt is cleared. The storm has passed. The door, the literal one and all the other ones, has been left open. And 2 people who came into this story on opposite sides of a ledger are standing in a garden in the morning light, trying to figure out what you do when the thing that defined the relationship disappears and leaves you standing in the space where it used to be. I told you at the beginning that the ending would split opinions. I meant it. That's the story. That's the honest version of it. Not the one where power's defeated and the brave girl walks away untouched. Not the one where she falls for the dangerous man and loses herself completely. The one where a real person makes a real decision with real eyes and real uncertainty, and the real vertiginous knowledge that there is no choice in front of her that is entirely safe. And she makes it anyway, on her own terms, with her own hands. Did she make the right choice? Would you have walked through that gate? Drop your answer below. I read every single one. And if you're new here and this was your first time, welcome. There are more where this came from. Subscribe. Come back.